Are you serious? In this week's video, we're going to be comparing the Dubia Roaches 4x2x4 PVC enclosure to the Zen Habitats 4x2x4 Meridian PVC enclosure. If you live in the United States, then you've probably heard of both Dubia Roaches and Zen Habitats when it comes to exotic pet enclosures. Often people ask me which is superior to the other. So today I thought it would be best that we compare the two enclosure brands and decide which is going to be the best enclosure brand for you. First, let's talk about what PVC even is and why we prefer it for all of our exotic pet enclosures. PVC stands for polyvinyl chloride. It's basically a high-strength thermoplastic material that can withstand a wide range of humidity and temperatures. This is ideal for exotic pet keepers because all of our animals have different husbandry requirements. For example, my bearded dragon Maisie needs to be in an arid environment where we have high temperatures and low humidity, whereas my white tree frogs need a temperature that's not as hot but also very humid. Therefore, PVC enclosures are going to be perfect for any type of animal because it can support different environments from arid to tropical. Before we start comparing the two enclosure brands and I go over our categories for comparison, let's talk about the availability and cost for both enclosure brands. Now, Dubia Roaches unfortunately only ships to the United States, and the cost of their 4x2x2 enclosure is $269 US, whereas their 4x2x4 enclosure is going to run you $449 US. Zen Habitats also ships to the United States, but they also ship to both Canada and the United Kingdom. However, the price difference is quite dramatic. For example, if you try to order a 4x2x2 enclosure to be shipped to the United States, that's going to be about $287 US. Not bad at all. But if you are trying to ship this enclosure to Canada, then that same 4x2x2 enclosure that was once $287 is now going to run you $447 US. Yikes. Quite a big jump there. And similarly, if you're trying to ship that same enclosure to the United Kingdom, it's going to run you about $316 US. For the 4x2x4 enclosure, the cost to ship to the United States is $479 US. Because of this, I'd say that both enclosure brands are going to be of interest to keepers who are in the United States. So keepers that are in Canada and the United Kingdom, probably a lot more affordable options for you, but now you know that if you do want a Zen Habitat enclosure, that it is possible for them to ship it to you. As you can tell from the prices that I list, these enclosures are very expensive. They're definitely an investment, but hopefully they're an investment that you only have to make once. These types of enclosures are forever homes. I actually finance all of my enclosures with ShopPay, where I'm able to pay for all of my enclosures by splitting them up into about 4 or 5 equal monthly payments. If you select the quickest payment plan, so it's probably going to be about 4 payments, then you're not going to have to worry about paying any interest. However, the longer you decide to finance it, let's say for 6 months, you might be paying some sort of interest on top of that. But without further ado, let's get into some of the categories that we're going to be using to rate and compare these enclosure brands. The 4 categories that I'm going to be using to rate each of these enclosure brands are setup, durability, customizability, and escapability. Let's get started, shall we? When it comes to ease of setup, I give Zen Habitats a score of 5 out of 5. When it comes to setting up my Zen Habitat enclosures, I was able to assemble this 4x2x4 on my own in less than 10 minutes. And that's because the enclosure that I have is specifically the Meridian PVC enclosure. The Meridian PVC enclosure is completely collapsible. All of the panels were all pre-built and all I had to do was push in a couple of screws and put the doors into place. Because this enclosure is fully collapsible, I think that this enclosure is perfect for someone who's in a temporary living scenario. For example, for maybe like my college students or people who are bouncing from apartment to apartment for work, it's so convenient to be able to have an enclosure like this that can fold flat, which makes it easy for you to package it and travel it wherever you go. One thing I love about these Zen Habitat enclosures is that when it comes to instruction for setting them up, if you click on the product on the website, they actually have the video instructions on the side of the product. Though all of their enclosures do come with paper instructions, it is nice to have a video tutorial because sometimes people can get lost in written instructions. When it comes to ease of setup for Dubia Roaches enclosure, I give them a score of 3 out of 5. It is very much possible to build these Dubia Roach enclosures on your own, but when it came to my 4x2x4 enclosure, I definitely needed my dad's help. When we're comparing the time that it takes to set up one of these Dubia Roach enclosures versus the Zen Habitats, it's definitely going to take a lot longer just because these enclosures aren't fully collapsible like the Zen Habitat enclosures, so there's going to be a lot more work and hammering to put it together. If you want to figure out how to set it up, you need to go to the FAQs, the frequently asked question link, where you're going to click on frequently asked questions, and then you're going to scroll all the way down to enclosure instructions, and then you're going to click on the type of enclosure that you have. I will say that regardless of if you're buying a 4x2x2, a 4x2x4, or even the 4x2x12 that I have up here, the instructions are pretty much the same. So if you look up the instructions on how to put together the 120-gallon enclosure, the steps are almost identical when it comes to setting up the 4x2x4. Because this enclosure is not collapsible, you are going to receive a lovely rubber mallet in the mail with your Dubia Roach enclosure. And these rubber mallets will basically become trophies for ethical pet keeping. I personally find that it's a lot more work to use these rubber mallets and a lot easier if you have something like this. That's more like it. I think maybe because it has a much larger surface area, it's easier to hammer in the corners versus something as small as this. Next, let's talk about durability. When it comes to durability, I give Zen Habitats a score of 4.5 out of 5. Although both the Zen Habitat and the Dubia Roach enclosures are both PVC material, there's a clear difference in them. The Zen Habitat seems to be made of like a thicker plastic material that definitely feels a lot more durable, and you can actually hear the difference. The Zen Habitat enclosures also come with acrylic doors. And at first, when I realized that mine came with acrylic doors, I thought, why am I spending so much money for an enclosure that doesn't even come with glass doors? But Zen Habitats actually uses acrylic doors because research shows that acrylic doors are 20% more efficient than glass at retaining heat. But as far as durability, the acrylic doors are definitely less durable than the glass. And if you're keeping a monitor lizard or a bearded dragon in an enclosure like that with acrylic doors, those things are going to get scratched. But Zen Habitats does sell glass doors that you can replace these acrylic doors for a price of $99 US. When it comes to durability for Dubia Roach enclosures, I give them a score of 4 out of 5. The Dubia Roach enclosures are made of PVC, but the PVC is almost like a foam sheet material. And you can see this for yourself when you're assembling it, but also when you're hammering in those sides, it is really easy to damage the PVC panels. These enclosures all come with glass doors. I don't think that they have an acrylic door option. Those glass doors are going to hold up really nicely, and honestly, I love the look of glass doors versus the acrylic. One thing I did notice about my older Dubia enclosures is that it is so hard to open the glass doors. I have vacuumed and cleaned out those gaps, and I'm still opening the door with my whole strength trying to open it. But I did notice that when I ordered my new 4x2x4 enclosure from Dubia, the glass doors do not have that struggle anymore. They open just as smoothly as the acrylic doors. So it turns out that there's a new design for the Dubia Roach enclosures, and they call it the V2 model. The V2 model comes with a thicker bottom panel, glass doors, but it has a built-in plastic door track that now allows for easy sliding of the doors. But when it comes to customizability, I give Zen Habitats a score of 3 out of 5. This is when people will use styrofoam boards to make their own custom ledges or cork bark backgrounds, dry lock method, silicone method, getting into that whole thing. Yes, it is definitely possible to do the custom backgrounds, but if you think about the Meridian enclosures, they're built so that they can be disassembled and assembled within 10 minutes. So if you're building a custom background in a Zen Habitats Meridian enclosure, you're basically destroying that purpose of it being able to be collapsible. Also, because of the fact that it's collapsible, you're gonna have so many nooks and crannies that if you were building some type of custom background, you would have to go through and seal all of those edges. If you were going to do a custom background, it would probably have to be one of those temporary styrofoam backgrounds that you kind of push into the enclosure, and then you put like a thick substrate layer to kind of hold it against the back. Also, if you look at the Zen Habitat website and all of the enclosures that people buy and decorate, none of them seem to have custom backgrounds in any of them. Not only that, but the Zen Habitat enclosures are definitely really expensive. We did see the difference in the price from the Zen Habitat enclosures 4x2x2 and the 4x2x4 to the Dubia Roaches one. And when I'm working with a more expensive enclosure, I'm more scared to destroy it. But that's just my personal preference. If you're someone who doesn't care to have a custom background, a lot of my enclosures don't have custom backgrounds, and I think that they still look beautiful. My Zen Habitat enclosure does not have a custom background, and I still think that it is amazing, and I get a lot of compliments on it. Then go for the Zen Habitat enclosure. When it comes to customizability for the Dubia Roach enclosures, I give them a score of 5 out of 5. I've seen these enclosures used to make some really sick water features. I used it to do a really cool desert background for my bearded dragon. I almost think that it's disrespectful to buy a Dubia Roaches enclosure and not do a custom background in it. I just feel like it's what they're made to do. Because these enclosures are not built to collapse, they have less cracks that you need to seal as far as waterproofing everything, depending on the type of custom background you want to do. The back of the Dubia 4x2x4 enclosure is completely flat and level, so when you do your custom background, it's going to be easy to get a nice level background in there. Besides the custom backgrounds, I love that both of these enclosure brands are built to be stacked and expanded. Some people ask me if you are able to stack Zen Habitat enclosures and Dubia Roach enclosures on top of each other even though they're different brands, and the answer is yes. I have a stack on the right side of me that has 2 Dubia Roach enclosures, and they're actually stacked using the 1-inch stacker bars from Zen Habitats, so those are definitely compatible. And then on this side I have a Zen Habitat enclosure and 2 Dubia Roach enclosures, and they are all stacked using, again, those 1-inch stacker bars from Zen Habitats. However, when it comes to expanding, you can only expand the Dubia Roach enclosures with other Dubia Roach enclosures, and you would have to buy their specific expansion kit, and same with Zen Habitats. You can only expand a Zen Habitat enclosure with another Zen Habitat enclosure using their expansion kit. So if you already have a Dubia Roach enclosure, you can keep going with that brand and keep getting those, and then you'll have the ability to expand them in the future, and same for Zen Habitat. This last category is probably one of the most important when it comes to exotic pet keeping: escapability. When you get an enclosure, you want to make sure that that enclosure is secure. You don't want any chance of your animal being able to escape, and God forbid you aren't able to find them, or you have other free roam mammals around the house that you would not want to meet your animal. When it comes to escapability, I give Zen Habitats a score of 4 out of 5. And this score specifically applies to the 4x2x4 Meridian enclosure. I personally have not had an escape with the Zen Habitat enclosure. The way that the back panels actually lock is with a switch. So when you kind of set up the back, there are these 4 little switches, 2 on each side, and you'll slide it and it'll release like a little tiny knob that'll lock into the other end. What I've noticed, and I don't know if this is specifically with my enclosure or not, but with a strong enough push from the inside, you can actually push open the switch, which will unlatch it, allowing there to be a gap. I have my enclosure on wheels, and a lot of times when I push the enclosures to kind of get behind it to clean, that switch does unlatch, creating that opening, and I have to push it back in and latch it again. Another thing with the Zen Habitat enclosures is there is a port in the middle of that 4x2x4, which allows you to stick any of your wires into it to run your lights and your heating, etc. So there are 2 types of plugs that go into that hole. The solid plug for if you don't want any type of port, and then there's also a port that has an opening, but the opening is pretty big. If you wanted to run wires through this enclosure and you were putting an animal in it, such as a corn snake, 100% that corn snake would be able to escape. My advice, and I've seen Zen Habitats do this, which is a great idea, but it is that extra step, is to take the plug that completely blocks out the opening and just screw a smaller hole inside of it that will allow that wire to get through and not your snake. When it comes to escapability, I give Dubia Roaches a score of 4.5 out of 5. The only way an animal can escape out of your Dubia enclosure, besides the fact that if you happen to leave a door open, is through those side ports where your wiring comes in. And I've had people tell me about their escapes through this exact same way. And I've actually had my adult ball python escape through that very same side port. And that is because everyone makes the same mistake. When you are installing that side plug to close the opening for your wires, there are 2 dots. There's a dot that's on the enclosure ring itself, and then there is a dot on the actual plug. When you put the plug in, the dots need to line up, but to lock it, when you turn it, the dots should not be touching. As long as the dots are not touching, then the enclosure is locked and there is no way your animal can push that out. I think that this has a lot to do with the fact that the instructions are not quite clear on this. Let's actually see if they mention twisting to lock the plug. They do put a little disclaimer on their written instructions. It says some species can turn these and possibly escape. If you do not have interior lighting, you can use an aquarium marine grade silicone to secure it permanently. Please be aware of the cure times based on the brand. So looking at this visual that they give me and the description, it doesn't look like they mention the importance of the dots not aligning for it to be locked into place. But it seems like if you have an animal that's smart enough to be able to turn the lock from the inside, then siliconing it to lock it will be best. I will say that I do see TikTok creators with dangerous venomous cobras, and they keep them in these 4x2x2 Dubia Roach enclosures. So if you're keeping a snake that dangerous in a 4x2x2 enclosure from Dubia, then you know that it's a secure enclosure. I will say that no matter what species you house in these enclosures, please buy an external lock. The external locks are cheap. I have them on my Amazon storefront. I have a pack of 2 on there, I believe. Not only do you want your animals not being able to come out, but you also don't want certain people going into your enclosures and being able to open them. Be a responsible pet keeper and protect your pets. But I think that's everything I wanted to talk about when it comes to comparing the 2 enclosure brands. I own both Dubia Roach and Zen Habitats enclosures, and I'm also an affiliate for Zen Habitats. I will always be honest about the pros and cons of any product, regardless of my affiliation towards them. But I hope that this video was a really good guide in helping you decide which enclosure is the best for you. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.